The Strait of Hormuz is mined. Iranian naval forces have deployed sea mines across the world's most critical oil choke point, through which 20% of global petroleum flows daily. One miscalculation, one detonation, and the global economy plunges into chaos. This is not a drill. Iran's deputy foreign minister just delivered an ultimatum to the BBC that changes everything. The United States must choose between war and ceasefire, he declared, as Israeli strikes pound Lebanon in what Tehran calls a grave violation of the fragile truce that was supposed to end this nightmare. Most people believe this conflict began with recent escalations, but they're wrong. The roots trace back to the collapse of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2018, when America withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. What followed was maximum pressure, crippling sanctions, and a regional proxy war that never truly ended. The Abraham Accords shifted Middle Eastern alliances, isolating Iran further while strengthening Israeli-Arab cooperation. Tehran responded by accelerating its nuclear program, now enriching uranium to levels that put them weeks away from weapons-grade material. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps expanded operations across Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Lebanon, creating what Israeli intelligence calls a ring of fire around their borders. When Hamas launched its October attack in 2023, it triggered a cascade that nobody could control. Hezbollah entered from the north, the Houthis blockaded the Red Sea, and Iranian-backed militias struck American bases across Iraq and Syria. The Biden administration tried diplomatic solutions, but hardliners in Tehran and Jerusalem had already chosen the path of confrontation. Israeli Defense Forces launched Operation Northern Thunder at 0300 local time yesterday, striking 17 Hezbollah positions across southern Lebanon with unprecedented intensity. F-35 stealth fighters dropped bunker-buster munitions on underground weapons depots, while Apache helicopters targeted rocket launch sites near the Litani River. The bombardment killed over 400 people in a single day, marking the deadliest escalation since the ceasefire agreement was signed 3 weeks ago. Lebanon has declared Black Wednesday a national day of mourning, as bodies are pulled from collapsed buildings in Tyre, Nabatea, and Bint Jbeil. Iran's President Pezeshkian condemned the strikes as rendering all negotiations meaningless, while Supreme Leader Khamenei authorized what sources describe as a measured but devastating response. The U.S.-Iran ceasefire, painstakingly negotiated through Omani intermediaries, now hangs by a thread as both sides prepare for scenarios nobody wants to contemplate. American intelligence agencies report Iranian fast attack boats moving toward shipping lanes, while Israeli submarines have been detected near Iranian territorial waters. The proxy war in Lebanon threatens to become the spark that ignites direct confrontation between nuclear powers. Benjamin Netanyahu faces the most precarious moment of his political career, balancing domestic pressure from coalition partners who demand total victory against American warnings about regional conflagration. His defense minister Yoav Gallant reportedly opposed the Lebanon strikes, creating fractures within the Israeli security establishment. On the Iranian side, President Pezeshkian represents the pragmatic faction seeking diplomatic solutions, but he's increasingly sidelined by IRGC commanders who view this as Iran's moment to reshape Middle Eastern power dynamics. Supreme Leader Khamenei, now 84 and in declining health, faces succession questions that make any sign of weakness potentially fatal to his legacy. American President Biden finds himself trapped between unwavering support for Israeli security and preventing a wider war that would devastate his economic agenda. Behind the scenes, Chinese diplomats are working overtime to position Beijing as the responsible mediator, much as they did with the Saudi-Iran rapprochement. Vladimir Putin sees opportunity in American distraction, while Turkish President Erdogan demands energy security guarantees as oil prices surge past $130 per barrel. India stands at the epicenter of this economic hurricane. 70% of Indian crude oil imports transit through the Strait of Hormuz, now partially blocked by Iranian mining operations. The Reserve Bank of India has already intervened twice this week to prevent the rupee from collapsing as energy import costs skyrocket. Indian refineries are scrambling to secure alternative supplies from Russia and Venezuela, but logistics networks cannot quickly adapt to such massive disruptions. The Chabahar port project, India's strategic gateway to Afghanistan and Central Asia, lies paralyzed as Iranian Revolutionary Guards fortify coastal positions. Indian naval assets in the Arabian Sea are coordinating with American Fifth Fleet operations, a delicate balance that risks antagonizing Tehran while protecting vital shipping lanes. Prime Minister Modi faces impossible choices as inflation spirals beyond 8% and industrial production slumps due to energy shortages. The conflict threatens India's carefully cultivated strategic autonomy, forcing New Delhi to choose sides in a confrontation it desperately wants to avoid. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh quietly authorized deployment of additional naval assets to the region, while External Affairs Minister Jahankar works diplomatic channels to prevent complete economic disaster. Three scenarios now dominate strategic planning in world capitals. The optimistic path involves immediate ceasefire implementation through emergency UN Security Council intervention, but Russia and China show little inclination to bail out American diplomacy. The catastrophic scenario sees Iranian closure of the Strait of Hormuz, triggering direct American military response, Israeli preemptive strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, and regional war consuming Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Turkey. The most likely outcome involves managed escalation, where both sides inflict pain while avoiding existential threats. But this middle path requires restraint from leaders who have already crossed multiple red lines. Here's my surprising prediction. Within 72 hours, we will see an Iranian cyber attack on Israeli critical infrastructure, specifically targeting electrical grids and water treatment facilities. Tehran has invested billions in asymmetric warfare capabilities, and cyber operations offer plausible deniability while demonstrating serious consequences for continued aggression. This digital escalation will force both sides to confront the true costs of uncontrolled conflict. The world is witnessing the collapse of the post-Cold War order in real time. American global leadership faces its gravest test since Vietnam as regional powers openly defy Washington's diplomatic initiatives. China's yuan-denominated oil settlements reached record levels this week, accelerating the erosion of dollar dominance that has underpinned American power for decades. Iranian officials privately acknowledge they cannot win a direct military confrontation with Israel and the United States, but they believe economic chaos serves their strategic objectives by demonstrating Western vulnerability. The next 48 hours will determine whether humanity steps back from the abyss or plunges into a conflict that reshapes global civilization. Energy markets are already pricing in scenarios that seemed impossible just months ago, while defense contractors prepare for sustained military operations across multiple theaters. The Lebanese people pay the highest price for decisions made in distant capitals, but their suffering reflects a broader breakdown of international law and humanitarian norms. That's your briefing for today. Subscribe so tomorrow's analysis lands in your feed the moment it goes live. And drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Will Iran's mining of the Strait of Hormuz force America into direct military action, or can diplomacy still prevent global economic collapse?